Hi, everyone. My name is Lindsay Halverson, and I work at POW as our advocacy coordinator. That means my job is working with our incredible community and all of our volunteers. Thank you so much for starting your journey on this volunteer training. This is the first part of our session called the POW Primer. This is really all the nitty-gritty information that you need to be a POW volunteer. So to get started, you know this guy, Jeremy Jones. He founded Protect Our Winters in 2007. He was traveling around the world snowboarding and saw there was less and less snow. Anyway, when he came back to the US, he realized that no one was really representing the winter economy on climate, and so he decided to found Protect Our Winters. This is our mission statement. This is really what we're ultimately trying to achieve at POW. We're turning passionate outdoor people to protect the places and lifestyles they love from climate change. We're a community of athletes, scientists, creatives, business leaders, advancing nonpartisan policies that protect the world today for future generations. We have over 120 athletes, work across 4 policy areas, and engage thousands of supporters on campaigns. So really, this is who POW is. And now, before we dive into exactly what we're working on and what we want you to do, I'm going to pass it over to our executive director, Mario Molina, who's going to talk through our theory of change. And this is the way we believe that POW can change the world and how we play a part.
Hello, my name is Mario Molina. I'm the executive director for Protect Our Winters. And I cannot express enough how grateful we are that you've agreed to become a POW volunteer. Without the work that you do at the grassroots level, it'd be impossible for us to advance our mission. At POW, we believe that it is critical for us to engage in climate advocacy as outdoor enthusiasts in order to advance nonpartisan policies that will actually help us meet the challenges of the 21st century when it comes to limiting global warming to no more than 2 degrees Celsius, which is what most scientists tell us is the upper limit of what society can cope with. So in order to do that, we believe that there are 3 things that need to happen simultaneously for the transition to take place. One is we need the technology and the financial instruments, as you can see over here in our Venn diagram at the bottom left. That includes the rapid scale deployment and large scale deployment of renewable energy, a new grid infrastructure, electric vehicles, sustainable agriculture, and the finance mechanisms such as green banks, tax credits, and carbon pricing to move our entire energy system from one that is dependent on fossil fuels over to renewable energy and independent energy. That's because renewable energy accounts for about 30% of our greenhouse gas emissions. And if we can actually tackle renewable energy and transportation together, we can actually tackle about 60% of our emissions. That is huge. And the good news is that those technologies and those financial mechanisms are already available. What we need is we need political leaders. We need elected officials in all branches of government and at all scales of government, from local to regional to state to federal, to actually prioritize the deployment of these technologies and the deployment of these policies and the financial incentives in order to help them get to market quickly and in order to help adoption happen rapidly. And the third thing that we need is for those policies to not only be enacted and supported by elected officials and the technologies to be there, but we need a cultural shift. We need a cultural change. That means that the norms about how we consume energy, the norms about our own carbon footprint, and the norms about how we approach the priorities, our cultural priorities as a society start changing. And that requires a change in conversation around the cultural conversation on climate change. It requires trusted messengers, people in their own communities who are seen as reliable agents of change. It requires the media to change the conversation around how we approach climate change and make it more of a priority. And if all of these things come together, then we can actually guarantee that any policy that gets enacted now will be resilient into the future as different administrations and regardless of which party is in control. What we believe is that we have an incredibly important role to play. There are over 50 million of us across the country who identify as either skiers, snowboarders, trail runners, mountain bikers, climbers. And if we were all to come together and agree that the number one thing we want to do is protect the landscapes, protect the playgrounds, that allow us to live those lifestyles that provide us with mental and physical health, as well as a sense of purpose and a sense of legacy that we want to pass these activities on to our children, then we could actually shift both the political conversation, the culture, and help those people who are working on the technology and the finance do their jobs easier. So we call this, what we call this at POW is, we call this our base plus strategy. And the reason we call it base plus is because we don't actually need all 50 million of us to activate on climate. We need a small percentage of those 50 million of us who believe that this is a priority to make it a priority at the right time and at the voting booths in the right geographies and during the right elections. And that means that any time that there is, at a time like this, when a lot of the wins that we're having, wins or losses, environmental wins or losses are happening at the margins, a small percentage of those 50 million people, a few thousand people in very specific localities, in very specific counties, in very specific congressional districts can actually have a disproportionate impact in who those elected leaders are, and once those leaders are elected, in what policies they actually enact. If we are consistent in raising our voices and letting them know that these are priorities. So really quickly, I want to cover just the three components of the cultural change: technology and financial instruments and political will. So to start with technology and financial instruments, many of us have been hearing a lot about what will be included in the recovery package from the COVID-19 crisis, what will not be included. And it's not only the next recovery package, but it's also how do we see the economy actually re-amping up again in 2021 and 2022. And we have an opportunity right now to actually reshape the way that the economy has worked by prioritizing in infrastructure and by prioritizing in incentives those jobs and those industries that can actually can be sustainable 30, 50 years into the future, while providing us with clean air, clean energy. So we'll be hearing a lot from POW talking about the importance of including tax extenders for renewable energy. That means that we allow renewable energy industry, whether it's the solar industry or the wind industry, to use tax deductions that they already have to invest in for capital projects, and also to maintain payroll, which is now incredibly important. As you know, there's 105,000 jobs that as of this recording, which is April 20th, Happy Earth Day, have been lost, Earth Week have been lost due to the COVID crisis. We don't have to actually lose those jobs. We can invest in our renewable energy industry, we can invest in electric vehicles and restart this economy with that lens in mind, and that will actually yield far more growth than continuing to subsidize fossil fuels, which are now failing under market standards because they can't actually compete. So in order to do that, obviously the people that are making some of these decisions are our elected officials. And our elected officials respond to two things. They respond to the voice of the people, the number of votes that we have. And then once they're in power, they respond to people that actually speak up and show up to make their voices heard. So our Protect Our Winters Action Fund, which is our C4, our C3 is Protect Our Winters, and that allows us to do the cultural change work, that allows us to do a lot of the policy work. But in order to work directly with elected officials, we have to have a completely separate organization with a completely separate board and separate governance, and that's the Protect Our Winters Action Fund. The Protect Our Winters Action Fund works really hard at making sure that in those key districts, in those key states, in those key areas, we elect people into office that are climate champions and who will prioritize the policies that we need more desperately now than ever in order to promote a renewable energy and a clean energy future. But it's not enough to get people into office and to get them elected. Once they've been elected, we work tirelessly to advocate and to lobby them to make sure that the promises that they may have made during the campaign trail, or that the priorities of the outdoor community, as well as the renewable energy industry, as well as the environment, as those of us that stand for public lands, are being heard and are top of mind. The good news is that those priorities are no longer competing with or separate to economic development and growth. Actually, by protecting our public lands and by protecting our renewable energy future, we can create more jobs and ensure a more resilient economy that does not depend on the fluctuations of the global fossil fuel global fossil fuel markets. Last but not least is, in order to make sure that these policies and that these priorities outlast any given administration, any given candidate, or any given political party, we need to make sure that they're priority across political parties and that they're a priority for all of us in the outdoor sports industry. And the way that we want to do that is we want to do that by changing the norms. So in 2018, POW went out and spread the message that part of being an outdoor person, part of the values of being an outdoors enthusiast, is actually engaging the civic process, because that is how we defend the playgrounds and the landscapes and our public lands from fossil fuel extraction, from reduction like we saw with Bear Sears National Monuments. And so the way that we do that is we're asking everyone to make sure and vote. Make sure to first vote, then become educated as to how do you vote. To pledge to vote, then to become educated as to how do you vote. Tell others to vote, and then make sure that you get out and actually vote. About 36% of our community, people who actually pledged to vote with POW in 2018, ended up not showing up to the polls. We need to change that culture. We need to make voting as much as a priority as getting out on a powder day for those of us in the outdoor sports community. And by doing that, we can also change the conversation. We can also tell our friends, hey, it's really important not only that we are engaged in the civic process and the political process, but that we're voting with climate as a top priority in our minds. And in order to understand what that means, becoming educated through resources through the resources that we provide at POW is a second piece of that conversation. So number one is telling people about the importance of becoming engaged in the civic process. And number two is the importance of becoming educated about how to vote. And then we work with people like yourselves who are influencers in your local networks or regional influencers, as well as some of our celebrities, to make sure that that message is getting spread far and wide, not only through conversation, one-on-one conversations and personal conversations, but also we're inserting it into the media, into both endemic media and the mainstream media. So REI Journal, Outside Online, etc., Rock and Ice, Alpinist, all of these magazines that so many of us follow, all of these publications that so many of us follow online and offline, as well as in mainstream media such as CNN, Wall Street Journal, New York Times, where we've had pieces published before. And our goal is to make sure that the conversation about climate continues to be front and center of the cultural conversation. And you can help us do that by engaging in social media, by following Protect Our Winters, but also by reposting our content, by making sure that asking your friends to repost their content or comment on it, and by engaging other people in your networks on this. So thank you so very much. Our team has done a fantastic job at putting a variety of resources that will help you accomplish all components of this mission, remembering that ultimately our goal is to protect these landscapes, to protect our playgrounds from fossil fuel extraction and from climate change, so that they can be enjoyed by generations to come. Again, my name is Mario Molina, and thank you so very much for joining us.
Awesome. Thank you, Mario. So before we dive any further, I also want to go over two different organizations that are key to understanding as a volunteer. So right now, we're Protect Our Winters. We're a 501c3 nonprofit that cannot engage in partisan political activity. So that means we can't tell anyone how to vote, who to vote for, or to vote on climate. We can engage in civil engagement. So that means registering people to vote, pledging people to vote. It's a really important distinction. The 501c4 nonprofit is Protect Our Winters Action Fund, or POW-AF. That can engage in partisan political activity by endorsing candidates and telling people to vote on climate. The Action Fund's mission statement is here. Protect Our Winters Action Fund works to make action on climate change a top policy priority for the outdoor sports community. And if you've ever filled out a ballot guide, this is where the ballot guide comes from, is our sister organization, Protect Our Winters Action Fund. All right, so why do we believe that we will win? This is the outdoor recreation economy. We're an $887 billion economy. That's an incredible amount of money that we bring to the table, and especially compared to other industries that have incredible influence in the policy areas. We have a huge economic weight when it comes to tax benefits, people working in the community, right? All right, we also have the numbers. 67% of the country thinks that global warming is happening. So that really means that's majority, right? We don't need to convince people that's happening, that climate change is happening. The Yale program on climate communications breaks down Americans into 6 buckets, kind of noted here on this slide. There are plenty of people in the alarmed and concerned categories. So really, the fact is we don't need to talk about the 10% of people who don't think climate change is real or human caused. They just happen to be incredibly loud. So we have an incredible population of Americans that believe getting outside and that believe climate change is real. So what's the key part there, right? So we have the economic weight, we have the numbers of people. How does POW play an incredibly important part there? And I always explain this as we're a really unique community, right? We adventure outside together, we put ourselves in the most vulnerable situations, both physically and mentally. We sometimes venture out and really put our lives in our companions' hands. That's an incredible amount of trust. And the uniqueness in that community shows in our incredible power and connection. So what if we took that power of the community of turning all these people out to vote and brought that to political power? We work sort of outside the traditional environmental spaces to really engage in thought on climate where we never have worked before. So I always like to think about this as the Butte, Montana story. I did a lot of work in Butte, Montana in 2018, and I'd go there and I'd say, hey, people are like, have you heard of POW before? And they're like, no, I haven't. I'm like, okay, well, no worries. Do you like to get outside? Do you like to ski, run, bike, climb, hike, do anything? And they're like, yeah, of course. And I'm like, hey, do you know climate change is changing the way that we do our sport? And they're like, oh, I've never thought about it like that. And there's a moment where the light bulb goes off, where it stops being a partisan issue and turns into something about protecting the places that we love to play. So the question really is, right? What's stopping us? We have the economic weight and therefore the political force. We have the numbers to win at the margins, and we have passionate outdoor people who pride themselves on realizing the improbable. If we can unite this community under a common banner for a common cause to ask for help, then what's stopping us? And I think the key there is you. We need your help doing this. POW alone cannot reach all those communities on our social. We need your help. So that's what we're going to talk about, how you can help. So before we get into that, policy agenda, right? There are a million things that we can work on. So we're trying to talk about what's the biggest bang for our buck. We know that individual actions like recycling plastics, reusable water bottles are not enough. We need systematic policy solutions. That means mitigation, not adaptation. You can always do more as an advocate, but we can only do the best of our ability. And sometimes that's just not enough. So how can we change things systematically? One of those ways is investing in a clean energy economy. We know that renewable energy is outcompeting traditional energy industries. And so how can we bring that economic power to legislation? So this year, or I guess in 2019, we worked on Colorado's climate goals, right? So this is ultramarathon runner Claire Gallagher and Olympian Ariel Gould. Colorado committed to reducing greenhouse gas emissions by 90% by 2050 from 2020 levels. So we were able to pass this bill in our state Senate and House, and then eventually get it signed by our governor. And really what this shows is an incredible story. So we sent over 600 letters to our representatives asking them to support the bill. And at the end of the day, it only passed by 2 votes. And that shows the incredible power that we have to win at the margins. So this is us here celebrating with our governor, Governor Jared Polis, after the bill was signed. Our second policy item is an economy-wide price on carbon. So we don't need to go into too much detail because carbon pricing is pretty wonky and there are a lot of different options there. But the key thing you need to know is that carbon pricing puts the price of polluting on the polluters. So that's the advocacy, that's the policies that we always want to support. If we will be talking more about carbon pricing in a state legislator, then we will connect with you directly on the specifics of that policy. We also work on electrifying transportation. So recently we've known that transportation has now or I guess not outcompeted, but it has overcome power in the most carbon intensive economy or carbon intensive sector. So that's mostly because we have such efficiencies now in power. So how can we increase renewable or increase electric vehicles on the road? We worked on a really fun hearing this past year in Colorado again on the zero emission vehicle standards. So this on the right is Mike Nathan from Arapahoe Basin ski area. And he came down to testify in Denver, as you can see in flip-flops there, talking about how everyone drives to a basin. There's not a bus, right? So how can we make electric vehicles more accessible in Colorado by increasing our zero emission vehicle standards? And I always like to talk about this as, did you know you can't, there's an electric hybrid plug-in Subaru Crosstrek? I didn't know that because I live in Colorado where we didn't have these standards before and dealers were not required to sell those vehicles. Now they are, and now I can buy my super sweet hybrid plug-in Crosstrek, which is incredibly exciting. So those are the policy solutions that we're working on. We also believe in elevating the significance of climate change on public lands narrative. And a lot of us talk about, all right, what are the largest emitters in the world? And you actually see that if US public lands were taken out, were just singled out, it would be the 5th largest emitter in the world. So we work on policies that help protect our public lands from extractive economies, like the Colorado Outdoor Recreation Economy Act, or CORE, which protects 73,000 acres of new wilderness area and 80,000 new acres for new recreation and conservation management that preserves existing outdoor uses such as hiking, biking. It also includes protections on the Thompson Divide by withdrawing approximately 200,000 acres from future oil and gas development. Something we're also launching is the outdoor state, right? So we like to think about this as there are 50 million people who like to get outside. If you threw all those people together in one big state, that would be the largest state in the country, larger than Texas and California. So how can we turn that incredible community and power out to vote in November and help bring the outdoor state together? So that's kind of what our plan is for the rest of 2020. The tactics, super simple. We want everyone to pledge to vote in November. Then we're going to make sure everyone is registered, gets educated, and makes a plan. The Get Educated section is on Protect Your Winters Action Fund as they release a ballot guide every year. We really want to make sure that everyone pledges. And there's a ton of research out there showing that if people pledge to vote, they're more likely to actually turn out and vote. So this is our funnel. So what I'm asking you this year is to make sure everyone pledges. And that might sound a little like, what's the point of that? But that's because we have this super simple way that we're moving people through a system of pledge, register, get educated, and make a plan. And we have a ton of incredible tools coming out to make sure that happens. We've kind of 2 strategies here, an air game. So we're posting on social, we're sending emails, texting, working with brand partners, posting op-eds, and print media. We're also using a new friend-to-friend tool called Team, and that is where I'll be asking for your help this year in using that app. We also have a ground game. Who knows if we're going to be able to do any of these this year. I did want to throw this in the training just in case we were able to host any of these events or send folks out. TBD, I will let everyone know what the status is of that kind of as everything develops. But originally we were planning on going to film tours like Teton Gravity Research, go to happy hours at breweries, trivia nights at bars, festivals, different ski area events, resort events, in-store activations, college talks, the whole shebang. We'll let you know if there is an upcoming event in your area, but we're not sure. So really, how can you help? Here's where we get to the meat of the presentation. And before I like to really dive into the specifics, it's volunteer principles, because these are incredibly important as you're representing POW to the community. And even if you're not going to an event, you might be the first time someone interacts with POW. So how can you help bring that person in a really authentic way that really speaks to POW? And I kind of talk about this as when we were first starting to like train volunteers, a lot of folks were like, oh, yep, you work, on recycling, or gonna, you know, encourage people to use reusable water bottles. And we're like, hey, that's awesome. And everyone should be doing that. But that's actually not what we do as POW. We work on the policy level and advocacy level. And that's how we want to present our work to the community. So these are the volunteer principles that I like to go over before anyone starts. So we turn passion to purpose, right? The same passion that you bring to your sport and the outdoor community, bring to the work as POW. We're positive, enthusiastic, and solutions oriented, and always bring that enthusiasm and energy into the work that you do. We also action over apathy. It's so easy to just be like, that's not my problem. It's too hard to face. But I'm an outdoor metaphor person, and that's not what we do as the outdoor community, right? We don't stay home. We get up and we climb a mountain, and not because it's easy, but because it is hard. And we like to take on that challenge, and we encourage others to do the same. We also take one step at a time. How do you climb a mountain? One step at a time. I know little actions feel so small, and asking 5 people to pledge to vote might feel tiny, but if we have 100 volunteers and they have 5 of their friends pledge to vote, that's 500 people. And that's enough to make a difference in an election. So how do you make those tiny steps forward? And even though your legs might be burning and your lungs are exploding, we continue to work our way up that mountain. And I want you to bring that same endurance and hard work to your work on climate. Progress, not perfection. We don't let perfection stop us from making progress. We're not a perfect community. I don't know about you guys, but I drive hours to one of my favorite hiking spots, and I take an energy intensive lift up the hill. We buy new gear. We're not perfect. That doesn't mean I can't keep working towards progress. And that doesn't exclude me from taking action on climate. I can still call my legislator and say, I want you to take action. And I'm trying to get better at carpooling, and I'm trying to get better. I'm trying to buy an electric vehicle. There are things you can do to be better, but I'm not going to stop that from making a difference. Accountability. We also hold each other accountable for our actions. We show up, we do the best we can, and we create a community that holds each other and ourselves accountable. We might make mistakes, but that's fine. We just acknowledge those, learn from them, and keep moving forward. We bring others in the same way we like to share a fire, have a spot in our car, on the chairlift. Our community is founded by the passion and joy of experiencing the outdoors together. So we want to invite people to our meetings, ask them to help out on our campaigns, and make this movement as unique as our community. We're always friendly, we're always welcoming, and we always bring people in. We also adhere to POW's policy agenda laid out in the last few slides. If you have questions on any specific policies, please do not hesitate to ask me, send me an email, and let me know. Our standards of conduct at all volunteer activities. So we are always solutions oriented and positive. We always bring people in and welcome everyone to our community. We're polite and respectful to people at events. And even though we might not be going to events, this still applies for our online activities. We always welcome people from all walks of life, even if they have a different view. And, in the face of challenges, a lot of the time, it's that 10% of people who are just wanting to get a rise out of you. So be polite and remain respectful. Don't debate climate science or climate deniers. Debating climate science really hurts our cause. All deniers want to do is fight tit for tat, and that's not an effective use of our time, to be honest. So how can we bring in the people who believe in climate, know it's human cause, but just want to take that next step on their climate action journey? So just say, great, thanks for have a good day. We'll see you later. Don't let those conversations derail you. We also are communicative and responsible. As an environmental nonprofit, we do not have endless resources, and we really rely on volunteers like you to help get this organization to run effectively. So please be responsible with all POW materials and assets we send you. Please make sure to get those back to us in mint condition. All right, so what are our tactics? Really, we are asking you to share and promote our calls to action. There's an ton of incredible social science that shows that you are an incredibly effective messenger. There's something interesting about when a friend asks a friend to do something, it is a really important way to get them involved and to actually make it less taboo of a topic. So it increases the knowledge, increases like actually action on that issue, overall conversation on the topic. Climate is also a taboo issue in a lot of places. Of no one really wants to be the bummer, right, and talk about that. So you talking about it helps eliminate that taboo. So this is why we're asking you to promote our calls. So a lot of this is getting your friends to vote. Think in terms of how do you get your friends to pledge to vote, get out to vote, and make sure we increase overall participation in the outdoor community. We'll be making a lot of these asks digitally in the next few months. Hopefully, maybe we'll be able to go back to in-person asks, but a lot of this will be digital. So we're asking you to ask your friends. And one way you can do that is to actually download Team. So take out your phone right now. I'm sure everyone has it next to them. And you can scan this QR code or go to jointeam.com/POW, and you'll be able to download this app. And we are using that to help make our calls to action and get everyone out to vote. And the whole purpose is to get your friends to pledge to vote. So we'll be using this as like our most effective tactic and tool for the next coming months in a new digital world. So you can pause this video right now and download the app. Next, we're going to be asking you to do a few things digitally. So number one, always and forever, I will be asking you to download Team, so might as well just do it now. You can serve on our social media street team, right? We all know social media is a game. So how can you jump on there and help comment, heck yeah, that's awesome. Help defend POW of like, some people are like, oh, you like to fly around the world. And we're like, well, actually check out our carbon calculator tool and you'll see how flying is not as big of an impact as your average coal-fired power plant. So be on our social media street team. You can join a digital event and help moderate the chat. If people have questions, you can answer questions for people, provide resources. We love more people on our digital events. Generate Crush It for Climate content. So if you were participating in March, you saw on Strava, we had a Crush It for Climate campaign. We're going to continue that. So share on social, on Instagram, how you're getting out there and crushing it for climate, and you might be featured on our social. Also ask your friends to sign up to volunteer, especially in places we haven't worked before. We always need more, friends out there with us. So please ask your friends to come and volunteer. You can help host a POW member alliance panel. So what we're trying to do is set up these digital panels that are more regional, talk about how climate impacts different regions in different way with a variety of POW Alliance athletes, scientists, and policy members. You can host a virtual trivia night. This is always fun, depending on your area and how everyone's opening up. A lot of breweries are still doing virtual events, so we're trying to host a virtual POW night. That's about not just POW, but outdoor history, climate, and your local policy issues. So this will be a really fun way to engage your local brewery. Or partner with a local brewery or gear shop on their digital event. Can we host a film? Can we engage on something, make it a POW themed night? Think creatively, get outside your comfort zone, and let me know if you have any questions. I have a ton of resources for all of these activities. So please let me know what you're interested in, and I'll send you a toolkit and some more information. When we come back, hopefully soon, we do set up at different events with a table. So you can see here, we'll set up at ski areas. We'll set up at Patagonia stores. If anyone's ever been to a Teton Gravity film, you'll know that we're out there in front slinging stickers. So this really depends on what we do later in the fall. I'll keep you all updated. We also host happy hours and trivia nights. So really this idea for hosting the trivia night was taken virtually. Hopefully we'll be able to host something in person, but we'd love some help with like that table and getting people to pledge to vote. Good work on making it through your first POW policy or your first POW primer. This is your first step on the journey. So Next, I'm going to ask you to watch a presentation we call Passion and Purpose. And this is what we ask most of our athletes to give. Then we're going to ask you to watch a video from our Science Alliance member, Liz Burkowski, on kind of the basic Climate Science 101. I really wanted to have this video in there, not to make you a climate science expert, but to just give you the tools and knowledge you need to feel comfortable talking about climate change. And lastly, we're going to talk about how to tell your story. And this is incredibly important because it not only motivates you on why you're here at POW and why you want to get involved, but also as the outdoor community, who doesn't love stories? So talk about why you're here and how others can get involved. So just for the next steps, answer the few questions below on each of the videos, and I will be in touch soon with some more next steps. Thanks so much.